There is a way to live Christianity that truly changes the mind, the heart, and the course of personal history. It is not effort nor religious discipline. It is learning to live in the right place. If you stay with me until the end, you will understand why so many attempts at change fail and how the Spirit can transform everything from the inside out in a practical and real way. Stay with me, because with absolute certainty, this teaching will help you in the Christian walk. The need for the constant application of the blood of Christ to exercise the Spirit. When a person converts, they receive a new life, but this does not mean that their conscience automatically starts functioning perfectly. Many new Christians continue carrying weight, guilt, and inner confusion, even though they have already been forgiven. This happens because they have not learned to live in the reality of the blood of Christ in a continuous manner. The Bible shows that the blood is not just something that saved us in the past, but a living resource for the present. In Hebrews 9, we see that the blood of Christ purifies the conscience so that we may serve the living God. And this reveals a daily process, not an isolated event. Applying the blood of Christ is learning to bring everything into the light of God without fear. When the heart accuses, the human tendency is to flee, justify oneself, or harden. However, the Word teaches us another way, to confess and trust. In 1 John 1, it is written that if we confess our sins, He is faithful and just to forgive us and to purify us from all unrighteousness. This purification is not just moral, but inner. It restores spiritual sensitivity and removes barriers that prevent the Spirit from functioning freely. Without the application of the blood, the Spirit becomes oppressed, silent, and without strength. The person continues reading the Bible, praying, and hearing messages, but everything seems distant and dry. This does not mean that God has withdrawn, but that the conscience is not clean. Revelation 12 shows that the blood of the Lamb overcomes the accusation of the enemy. Whenever the accusation remains, the Spirit loses liberty. When the blood is applied by faith, the Spirit returns to breathe, to respond, and to move before God. Learning to live this way is an essential milestone in Christian growth. The blood prepares the inner ground so that the Spirit may be exercised with clarity, peace, and boldness before God. Without this foundation, all spiritual progress becomes heavy and forced. But when the conscience is kept clean, something quietly begins to change inside. And it is exactly there that a new, inevitable question arises. After the conscience is purified, how does the Spirit become practically guided in the day-to-day life? The separation between spirit and soul as a condition for inner transformation. The greatest challenge for the new Christian becomes discerning what comes from the Spirit and what is born from the soul. Many people think that every intense feeling or elevated thought is spiritual, but the Bible shows that this is not always true. In Hebrews 4, the Word of God is presented as living and effective, capable of dividing soul and spirit. This reveals that, without this separation, the Christian lives by mixing emotions, self-will, and natural impressions with the direction of the Spirit of God. The soul is the center of human personality, thoughts, emotions, and decisions. It is not evil, but it needs to be governed. When the soul takes control, the Christian starts to live by what they feel, like, or prefer. The Spirit, on the other hand, is the place where God dwells and communicates. Romans 8 shows that the Spirit of God testifies with our spirit, not with our emotions. Without discernment, the person reacts emotionally, thinking they are obeying God, when in fact they are just following inner impulses. This inner confusion generates spiritual instability. One day the person is animated, the next day they are unmotivated without knowing why. The problem is not lack of faith, but lack of separation. When soul and spirit are mixed, there is no clarity. The Word of God enters exactly at this point to bring light, showing what needs to be denied and what needs to be followed. Psalm 119 shows how the Word illuminates the path, not only externally, but within the heart. As the Christian learns to become quiet internally, to deny immediate reactions, and to wait before God, this separation begins to happen practically. The spirit becomes clearer, firmer, and more sensitive. The Christian life ceases to be confusing and starts to have direction. But this inner clarity raises another essential question. Once the Spirit begins to be discerned, how to learn to obey its direction without resistance, learning to live, walk, and act according to the Spirit, not according to the flesh. When the Spirit begins to be discerned from the soul, a new calling arises, learning to live according to it in the day-to-day life. Romans 8 makes this very clear by saying that the righteous requirement of the law is fulfilled in those who walk not according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. Here, the focus is not on external rules, but on a constant inner direction. Walking in the Spirit is not an isolated spiritual event. It is a continuous, practical, and real lifestyle. Many Christians limit spiritual life to specific moments, such as prayer or worship. However, Ephesians 6 shows that we should pray at all times in the Spirit, which reveals that the Spirit must be active in all areas of life. Speaking, deciding, reacting, and even being silent need to happen from this inner source. When this does not happen, even seemingly correct attitudes can be born from the flesh, from human effort, or from the religious ego. Living according to the flesh does not just mean committing visible sins, but acting from the old man, from the nature not governed by the Spirit. Galatians 6 shows that even the restoration of someone who has fallen can only happen correctly when it is done in a spirit of gentleness. This reveals that even good intentions can become destructive if they are led by the soul and not by the Spirit. The source matters more than the appearance of the action. As the Christian learns to consult the Spirit before acting, something begins to change inside. Decisions become simpler, reactions more controlled, and communion with God deeper. But living like this raises a new challenge. How to maintain this spiritual sensitivity amidst the pressures, conflicts, and relationships of daily life. This is exactly what the next point begins to reveal. Being in the Spirit is the condition for seeing, discerning, and understanding. The Bible shows that all true spiritual perception begins when the person is in the Spirit. In Revelation, John repeatedly affirms that he only received the great visions because he was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, as we read in Revelation 1:4, 17, and 21. This reveals a deep spiritual principle. The reality of God is not seen with the natural mind, but with the exercised spirit. Outside of the Spirit, even spiritual things become confusing. Many try to understand the will of God only through analysis, study, or logical reasoning. However, Ephesians 1 states that wisdom and revelation come through the Spirit, not the isolated intellect. When someone remains only in the mind, they can accumulate biblical information, but continue without inner light. Spiritual clarity is not born from mental effort, but from the correct position before God. This explains why intelligent and well-instructed people still live full of spiritual doubts. The light is not missing because God hides, but because the person does not enter the place where the light is released. John only saw when he was in the Spirit. Outside of it, the visions did not manifest. The same happens today. Revelation is available, but it requires an appropriate inner posture. When the Christian learns to return to the Spirit, even in the midst of confusion, something begins to align inside. The things that once seemed contradictory start to make sense, and the heart finds rest. But this clarity brings a new responsibility: how to relate to others without leaving the Spirit. This is what begins to be addressed next. The Christian life is not measured by right or wrong, but by soul or spirit. One of the most confronting points in the text is the affirmation that living by discerning only between right and wrong belongs to the realm of religion. The true spiritual criterion is not moral, but of inner origin. Does what we do come from the soul or the spirit? Romans 8 makes it clear that the righteous requirement of the law is fulfilled only in those who walk not according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. The issue is not external behavior, but internal source. Religion teaches a person to police themselves, to adjust attitudes, and to seek what seems correct in human eyes. However, this can be done entirely by the soul, without any real dependence on the Spirit. It is possible to do good things, speak the right words, and still remain outside of the Spirit. The text shows that God's salvation does not operate by rules, but by a life that flows from the regenerated Spirit. Jesus made this clear when he said that loving or hating externally is not the central point. In Luke 14, he confronts the natural idea of love by stating that if anyone does not hate even their own soul life, they cannot be his disciple. This reveals that even love, when born from the soul, can become a spiritual obstacle. What defines the spiritual value of an action is where it is produced. When this understanding begins to form, the Christian realizes that many decisions need to be reviewed. It is no longer enough to ask, is this right or wrong, but is this coming from my natural self or from the Spirit? This change of criterion completely transforms the way of living and prepares the ground for an even deeper confrontation. The need to deny one's own soul. The regenerated spirit is the center of our new life. The regeneration of the human spirit is the key to a true Christian life. The Apostle Paul makes it clear that with Christ's redemptive work, the Christian spirit was vivified, and now he must live by this new nature. When we are born again, we do not become a different person in our soul. The transformation happens in the Spirit. This new person generated by the Spirit is where Christ, as the life-giving Spirit, resides, 1 Corinthians 6:17. The regenerated Spirit is not just an organ we possess, but the center of our new identity. The Spirit, now inhabited by Christ, becomes the true inner man, Ephesians 3:16. The Apostle Paul teaches us that we should live not by the flesh nor by the soul, but by the Spirit. This means that our regenerated spirit becomes the source of our daily life, from which all our actions should arise. If we remain connected to the Spirit, we become more aware of our true identity in Christ. The things that were once complicated or difficult to understand begin to make sense, because it is in the Spirit that we receive the necessary wisdom and revelation, Ephesians 1:17. This is the radical change of Christianity. Instead of living by the impulse of the soul or by the external standards of religion, we start to live by the vitality of our spirit, which connects us directly with God. The true strength for the Christian life comes from this regenerated spirit. It is not the soul that gives direction, nor is it the flesh that dominates the Christian life. The Spirit is now the vital center of our existence. We need to learn to live by this new reality, recognizing that everything we do must originate in it and not in our emotions or reasons. This makes the Christian experience an abundant life, aligned with God's will in all aspects of their life. Living in the Spirit is living by the new person, not by the old man. The Christian life is not an attempt to improve the old man, but the daily experience of living by a new person. The Apostle Paul shows that there is a clear difference between living according to the flesh and living according to the Spirit, Romans 8:4. The old man manifests when we act from the natural soul, relying on feelings, opinions, and automatic reactions. The new person, on the other hand, expresses themselves when we give place to the regenerated spirit, where Christ dwells. Often the Christian's mistake is trying to do correct things while still moved by the old man. It is possible to act externally in a correct manner and yet be outside of the Spirit. The central point is not what we do, but the source from which we do it. When we live by the Spirit, we are not trying to be spiritual. We simply express the life that is already within us, spontaneously and vitally. The Lord Jesus made it clear that following him involves denying the soul life. Luke 9:23-24. This does not mean nullifying the personality, but rejecting the independence of the old man. The soul wants to control, decide, and react on its own, while the Spirit learns to depend on Christ. This choice happens many times a day, in simple and common situations, and not just in visible spiritual moments. When we learn to identify whether we are living by the old man or by the new person, we begin to experience true freedom. The Spirit starts to govern our words, attitudes, and decisions. This living is neither forced nor heavy, but organic and full of life, preparing the heart to perceive something even deeper about how to act in every daily situation. Doing everything in the Spirit, including the common things of life. Living in the Spirit is not limited to religious moments, such as prayer or reading the Word. The biblical calling is to do everything in the Spirit in every detail of daily life. Paul reminds us that we should pray at all times in the Spirit, Ephesians 6:18, which reveals a broader principle. The Spirit must be the constant environment of our living. Talking, working, deciding, and even resting can be spiritual experiences when done from the Spirit. Many believe that certain emotions or actions do not match the spiritual life, but the point is not the type of action, but its source. Even strong feelings such as zeal or indignation can be correct when they arise from the Spirit. The Lord Jesus himself demonstrated this when he cleansed the temple, acting with authority and holy zeal, John 2:14-15. Outside of the Spirit, even love can be natural. In the Spirit, everything gains legitimacy before God. This teaches us that the correct question is not, is this right or wrong, but is this being done in the Spirit or in the soul? Religion focuses on external rules, but life in the Spirit focuses on a living person inside us. When this perception becomes clear, the Christian stops living by external standards and starts living by a continuous inner communion. Learning to do everything in the Spirit requires sensitivity and constant practice. Small day-to-day decisions become opportunities to exercise the inner man. This learning naturally leads us to discern something even deeper: the difference between living according to religious teachings and living according to the life of Christ himself. Living in the Spirit and not according to religious teachings. Living in the Spirit is not the same as living according to religious rules. Religion teaches what is right and wrong, but God's salvation calls us to something deeper, to live by Christ in the Spirit. Many people believe that acting correctly is enough, but the Bible reveals that someone can do good and still be completely in the soul. For God, the criterion is not moral, it is spiritual. The Apostle Paul states that the righteousness of God is fulfilled in those who walk not according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit, Romans 8:4. This shows that it is not human effort that produces spiritual life, but the Spirit operating in our regenerated spirit. When the Christian life is reduced to external principles, it transforms into a religious system, even if it bears the name of Christ. Culture, education, and good intentions can shape correct people, but this does not mean they are living in the Spirit. Someone can be disciplined, gentle, and ethical, and yet act entirely from the soul. Therefore, true Christian life does not begin with behavior, but with a change of inner source. The question ceases to be, is this right or wrong? And becomes, does this come from the Spirit or the soul? This discernment brings freedom, but also confrontation. It obligates us to recognize that many practices considered spiritual may be void of life. When this light begins to shine, a constant inner vigilance is born, learning to remain in the Spirit and not return, almost without realizing it, to the old self-centered way of living. Rejecting the natural soul to live in the Spirit, Jesus made it clear that following him involves denying oneself and losing the soul life. This word appears repeatedly in the Gospels, such as in Matthew 16:24-25, Mark 8:34-35, Luke 9:23-24, and John 12:25. Denying the soul does not mean rejecting the personality or the feelings, but refusing for them to govern our spiritual life. The center ceases to be the self and becomes Christ in the Spirit. The human soul was deeply developed throughout life. Since birth, we have learned to live by the mind, the emotions, and the will. Therefore, living in the Spirit is not something automatic after conversion. It is a continuous transition, often difficult, because the soul wants to maintain control. Without realizing it, we return to deciding, reacting, and acting from the old man. The New Testament shows that to perceive the things of God, receive wisdom and revelation, we need to be in the Spirit. Paul affirms in 1 Corinthians 2:11-12 that the things of God are spiritually discerned, and in Ephesians 1:17 he speaks of the spirit of wisdom and revelation. When we remain in the soul, even reading the Bible, we can remain without inner light. Rejecting the soul is not an isolated act, but a daily practice. In every situation, a silent choice arises, to react naturally or to turn back to the Spirit. This inner decision defines whether we walk in the life of the new man or if we just repeat old patterns with Christian language. It is exactly at this point that many stumble, and this is where the next truth becomes essential. Exercising the Spirit in everything, not just in prayer. Many Christians associate exercising the Spirit only with the moment of prayer, but this is a limited understanding. Prayer is, indeed, an important way to exercise the Spirit, but it is not the only one. The biblical calling is to live, walk, speak, and do everything in the Spirit. Ephesians 6:18 shows prayer in the Spirit, but this practice needs to overflow into all of daily life. When the Spirit is not exercised in the daily routine, it loses sensitivity. Just like a muscle that is not used weakens, the Spirit that is ignored ceases to function fully. Often, the difficulty in praying does not arise from lack of will, but from the fact that we constantly live in the soul. We exercise the mind, the emotions, and the will, but we leave the Spirit aside. This explains why it is possible to talk, discuss, analyze, and even quote the Bible while being completely outside of the Spirit. When this happens, even seemingly good things do not produce life. Contact with others becomes merely human, natural, without spiritual communion. The Christian life loses freshness, direction, and power, even if the words are correct. Exercising the Spirit involves continuous inner attention. Before speaking, deciding, or acting, there is a silent turning toward the inner man. When this practice becomes habitual, prayer flows more easily, the word becomes alive, and the relationship with God gains depth. This constant exercise prepares the heart for something even deeper, learning to remain in the Spirit, to receive light and revelation. Wisdom and revelation are only received in the Spirit. The true understanding of the things of God is not born from mental effort, but from remaining in the Spirit. Ephesians 1:17 speaks clearly of a spirit of wisdom and revelation, showing that spiritual light is not the result of debate, reasoning, or natural study. The more someone tries to understand divine things only with the mind, the more easily they fall into confusion and inner darkness. Discussions, arguments, and excessive analysis produce the sensation of clarity, but often only strengthen deception. The human mind tends to justify itself, reinforcing personal opinions and positions. When someone abandons the Spirit to defend ideas, they lose the ability to receive light. Revelation does not come from intellectual convincing, but from inner silence before God. When the person enters the Spirit, something different happens. Without effort, the light appears, and what once seemed confusing becomes clear. Revelation 1:10 shows that John was in the Spirit when he saw the reality of the church, the world, and eternity. Spiritual vision is born from this inner place, where God speaks without noise and without dispute. Remaining in the Spirit generates wise decisions, adjusted relationships, and true discernment. Outside of the Spirit, even good intentions can result in errors. In the Spirit, even difficult situations align. Everything becomes clear as crystal when the soul quiets down and the Spirit takes control. This is the highest point of the practical Christian life, and also the silent invitation for the entire personal history to be transformed from within. The transformation that God desires is neither noisy nor immediate in the eyes of others, but it is consistent and true. It begins internally and little by little reaches the mind, relationships, decisions, and even the way you read your own history. The Spirit does not just change what we do, He changes the place from which we live. If this content helped you to see something new, keep it in your heart. Do not rush processes. Do not try to apply everything at once. Learn to return to the Spirit, to listen carefully, and to walk with sensitivity. This channel exists for those who do not want an automatic faith, but a life truly led by God. If this message spoke to you, subscribe to the channel and walk with us in the next videos.